Welcome back. Today we want to tackle the condition of your heart.
Jill and I, we know one couple who has moved repeatedly throughout the years, anticipating that with each move, their marriage would get better.
Aren't we just silly when we think that an external change is going to make a difference with an internal problem? And what we have to do is we have to stop chasing external changes and start making the internal changes that we need to make. We've got to do that hard emotional work that we talked about in the first video. So Mark and I have been married 25 wonderful years, and we're getting ready to celebrate our 34th wedding anniversary. And it wasn't that there were 8 bad years. There were 2 bad years, and then some strong years, and then another bad year and some strong years. And then it was about 5 years ago that our marriage went through what we now refer to as the crisis.
And I can remember the day that I looked into Jill's eyes and said, "I'm done. I'm leaving." In fact, it was in this kitchen. And right behind Jill, I told my 2 boys that I was leaving, that I still loved them, but I didn't love their mother, and I was leaving. And I'm still wrecked with the emotion, remembering the look of my boys when I told them. But back then, I didn't realize that because of the slow fades, my heart had become wrecked.
One of the things that Mark and I have come to understand is that in marriage, we open and close our heart to one another, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes on an hour-by-hour basis. But what happens with those fades is when we close our heart and then we don't do what we need to do to open it back up. We don't ask for forgiveness. We don't offer forgiveness. We don't address the issues that need to be addressed. And what begins to happen then is we close our heart off to each other. And I do remember when Mark was standing here and he even used those words. He said, "I have closed my heart off to you. And I don't think I could ever open it again." And I remember being crushed by those words. I knew that he had been struggling. I knew that he had been disillusioned with life, not just our marriage, but life. And but I didn't realize to what extent that was going on inside of him.
Well, my heart was wrecked. My heart was completely shut off to Jill, and I believed that my heart could never be opened again. And what was happening was I had a soul mirage. I had a soul mirage that said, love is a feeling. Love, once it's lost, it can't be rebuilt. And for me, I was to the point where I was so given up and without hope in our marriage that I pursued another relationship and I had an affair. And that affair was my attempt that I'm starting a new season of my life. I'm riding off into the sunset, starting off brand new. But yet it wasn't very long before that relationship began to have the same struggles. Because what happened, friends, is that when I left, I took me with me. And me was the problem.
Well, you weren't the only problem. I was contributing in an unhealthy way to our relationship as well. I mean, it takes 2 to tango, but there definitely was a war going on inside of you, and your heart had really shut down, and that was a very scary place to be.
It was. It was totally scary. I know it was scary for you and for the kids, but what was even more scary for me is I had no idea how to reopen my heart. I had no idea what that process would look like. And I thought starting a new season, making those big changes would reopen my heart, but it didn't reopen it. And so I had the process of beginning to learn how God was going to reopen a heart that had become closed and sealed and pursuing that soul mirage.
And during this time, there was, after I discovered the affair, We were still together for about 4 months, 5 months, and then eventually you left. And during that time, when Mark left, every time I would see him, which would be about once a week, I would just ask him to be a man of integrity. I would ask him if he would please leave the other relationship and recommit to his family and his marriage. And each time he would say, no, I have no desire to do that. And so it was a place of feeling very hopeless on my part as well.
Because Jill and I have 5 children, I set up a weekly date with Jill, although we didn't call it a date. It was really a business meeting, but I wanted to have a safe place to have conversation, to talk about our kids, because we had 5 kids together. How in the world are we going to navigate this? Well, what blew me away was Jill was so incredibly nice, and she was making changes. Now, in the beginning, I thought those changes were just manipulation, any way to get you back in the house, but yet I began to realize they weren't. In fact, one time we were sitting in a restaurant and I said to Jill, I just don't understand why you're being so nice to me after all that I've done to you.
And I remember that moment, and I was really like measuring my words. And so I stopped for a moment. I was like, I don't even know how to explain it. But I think I eventually said, Mark, I don't know how to explain it. It's just unhumanable.
Well, I had never heard that word before, unhumanable. And
That's because I made it up in that moment.
I know. And I started to laugh, and then I was like, wait, I shouldn't laugh. But I was like, Jilly, I just got to say, I've never heard that before. What in the world is that?
And it was the only way I could describe. I really felt like during that time of separation, I was drawing closer to the Lord than I probably ever had been. And His Word had been speaking to me about loving when it's hard. And I had never had to love when it's hard. I'd always had to love when it was easy. And I felt like God was really growing me to learn how to love when it was hard. And I think that's what you were beginning to feel.
Yeah. And I was honestly amazed at how many people around us were encouraging me. Hey, you guys have tried, just keep doing what you're doing, Mark. It probably was never meant to be. And you heard similar things.
I did, yeah, especially, because, people, those closest to me knew I was hurt. And so what do they want to do? They want to protect that hurt. And I, from I had biblical grounds for divorce. So, just go ahead and move forward. But I was listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit, and I felt like God was saying, no, I want you to stay right where you are, and I want you to learn how to love deeper. And that was what you were beginning to feel. And then Easter Sunday happened.
Yes. It was an odd thing. That year, I had been praying that Easter would be more than chocolate and candies and Easter bunnies. Of course, we never celebrated Easter that way, but I was looking for Easter to be a significant change for me. And it was on Easter morning. I had forgotten, I wasn't even aware that it was Easter that day, but I had put a piece of paper in front of Jill like this, and I had drawn a fence, and I was on one side, Jill was on the other, and I had a list of all of the things that was wrong with our marriage with Jill. And I said to Jill, we have been coming to this fence and talking. I don't really want you in my yard, and I don't want to get in your yard. And honestly, Jill, I'm to the place where I don't want to come to the fence anymore. So I don't want to come to the fence anymore. And it was at that point that I said, I'm going to pursue a divorce. Now what happened next is almost schizophrenic, because Jill then said,
I said to him, well, I know that's what you want to do, but I'm sure that Jesus didn't want to go to the cross, and He didn't want to die a horrible death, but He did what He had to do, and He did the right thing. And it's Easter. Wouldn't that be a pretty powerful decision for you to make as well?
All of a sudden, I had this remembering that I had been praying that Easter would be different. And up to this point, I was frustrated in this new relationship. I was frustrated with myself, with where my situation was. And it was at that point that all of a sudden I realized it's Easter. Oh my gosh, Jesus didn't want to do this. And so I looked at Jill and I said, you are right. He didn't want to do this. And so I'm going to pray that prayer. And what Jesus prayed was, God, take this cup from me. And what I prayed was, God, I don't know how to make this work. I don't know how to clean up this mess. But if you would help us, I am willing to make the change. And honestly, for the first time in my life, I feel like I truly repented of the lordship of my life. No longer was I in control, because with me being in control, I made a huge, huge mess of everything. And then I looked at Jill and said, I'm going to commit to this. And so I don't even know what you thought, but one minute I'm divorcing, the next minute I'm in a radical change. And I'm sure I just remember you saying, yeah, well, we'll see.
I think I was thinking that. You might have read that on my face. But yeah, I remember though, you took that paper and you turned it over. And I didn't know what that was at that time, but you later told me what was kind of going on.
Yeah. What happened was, I'm looking at the mess, and I felt like I heard Father God say to me, Mark, if you will trust me for the clean slate, because something new, something clean was going to have to happen for this to work out. So Mark, if you'll trust me for the clean slate, I'll take care of the rest. And then it was the oddest thing. We went about our day, and by the end of the day, I said to Jill, I hardly can't even remember what was on that other side of that page. Now I could still remember it, I could draw it out and all of that, but truly God was opening up a heart that had been shut down and had become isolated from you.
So I actually had hope. I had a sense of hope. At the same time, I was not sure what to think, because you had gone back and forth 6 other times over the last 8 months. You would feel guilty and then you would recommit, but it would only be a short-term commitment, and then you would get drawn back, and it was back and forth. And so there was a part of me that felt hopeful, and then there was a part of me that wondered if it was for real. But I think the hope was more because what I realized is that you really were seeing it through different eyes in that moment. You were seeing it through eyes of surrender, and I had not seen that kind of surrender, and I hadn't seen you look at it through the lens of Christ, and making a determination to not do what your flesh wanted to do, but instead to do what God wanted you to do. And so that really is the part that gave me the most hope. And so today, as we share our story, what we want to encourage you to do is to examine the condition of your own heart. Is it closed toward your spouse? Is it open? Where do you need to surrender? Where do you need to confess? Where do you need to push your thoughts in the right direction? Because when we can truly surrender, then we have the ability to pick up our God tools and begin to stop the fades.